Now time for our 11:30 interview this week. It's with the man who played one of the best-loved characters in Britain's longest-running soap opera. Kevin Kennedy played Curly Watts in Coronation Street for 20 years. But in his new book, The Street to Recovery, Kevin talks about his battle with drug and alcohol abuse while he was on Coronation Street. You can pick up the phone to us about this interview if you like, 0500 909 693. He'll tell us about the addictions that nearly killed him, but I started by asking him about his early life.
I was just a normal child. When at school I didn't excel in anything, and I wasn't rubbish at anything. I was kind of a middling sort of person. Played all the normal sports, played football for my school, swam for my school, all that kind of stuff. So I was a normal guy until I discovered performing arts, and then that sort of changed me somewhat.
Changed in what way?
Well, it made me certainly more outgoing. And I realised it was a top way to meet girls, which is, I think, a lot of lads get into drama purely for that reason. And plus, it's easier than maths or English, and it's 2 periods of messing about, really. So that's what really got me into it. And then I discovered it as an art when I ventured further into things like Manchester Youth Theatre, which was a very professionally run outfit. And then I realised that, well, that was the only thing for me. Plus, at that time, 1976, 77, punk was just breaking out. And I think that opened up a lot of doors for a lot of people, because my peers, certainly in the likes of Johnny Marr, Andy Rourke and so forth, were doing things which were groundbreaking, and a lot of my peers were writing stuff and were performing stuff. And I think that kind of music arts revolution opened doors for a lot of people. I think we need a new one. I think we need a new revolution musically. But
what would that be?
Sorry?
What would that be?
I don't know, something different. I mean, we're so wrapped up in X Factor and things like that we're missing the point, aren't we? We're missing the roots, and now it's just people want to be famous, and they've got to have a backstory, which I find nauseating. But there you are.
How did you get the break into Coronation Street?
I was quite a busy boy before Coronation Street. I'd been in the West End, and I was performing in various theatres around the country. And when the Coronation Street gig came up, that's exactly what it was. It was a gig. I thought, brilliant. It means I can live at home. I can't have to pay for me digs. I get my washing done and some food, and I live with my mum and dad. And it fitted perfectly, these 4 episodes, they fitted perfectly into a 2-week period where I was out of work. And I was away to do Hamlet in Sheffield at the Crucible, just across the Pennines there. So for me, it was just a perfect fill-in while I was waiting to go and do this other show. I mean, it wasn't until I walked into the place that I realised this amazing television institution that I was just about to join.
It's an incredible institution, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
What's it feel like behind the scenes of it? Is it like most big institutions in terms of, if you're at the top, there's a lot of pressure?
No, I mean, there's pressure, but there's pressure in all jobs. I mean, there was pressure then because we had to consistently perform to a certain level. And it wasn't just the actors, it was the writers and the crew, because it's an ongoing drama, which means you've got to keep it going. Some people say it's like a sausage factory, but these are quality sausages, and the standard of which you've got to live up to is with the people that have gone before you. Is high.
Yeah, but exactly. And so therefore, when you're on that treadmill, and it is a treadmill, it's like I do a daily radio program 7 days a week. All right.
Yeah.
And you want to do a big show every day, and you can't. And it doesn't work like that. So what's it like when you're tired or you're having something in your life that's crap? And yet you've still got to be that top actor?
Well, it's just I think it's inbred in actors and anyone who does anything in performing. I mean, you may be feeling rubbish before you go on the radio, but I'm sure as soon as that you put the headphones on, then everything changes. And it's the same in theatre, in TV. You leave your troubles at the stage door. and you go on and you do what you have to do, and that's the art, I think, and that's the beauty of this job. We get to hide behind characters who are not having the hard time as maybe we are in reality.
You had troubles.
Indeed.
Like you know, most of us have troubles of some description. So yours was with drink and drugs.
Yeah.
How did you get addicted, and which did you get addicted to first?
Well, I was never addicted to drugs. I only used drugs just to drink more. If you'd have said to me, "I want you to drink this," or "I want you to chop this table up and eat it," and you'd be able to drink for 3 more hours, I would have done it. So when it came up to giving up drugs, and they said, "Well, you have to stop that was never a problem. That was not my drug of choice. My drug of choice was alcohol." A lot of people have said, can you blame it on the pressure of Coronation Street? And I'm afraid the answer to that is a resounding no. I mean, I did it because I liked it. You know, I'm not one of those kind of people that said, "Oh, the pressure of being famous." I mean, I was having a great time. I was 21. You know, 21, single, had some real money for the first time in a long time. So I was having an absolute superb time, and I didn't really became dependent on it until around about 96, 97, 98, and I'd been in the show then for a good 10 years. So I was used to it. You know, I was used to the pressure by then.
And how much were you drinking?
Well, I was a maintenance drinker. I was a functioning alcoholic, which meant that I had to maintain a certain level of alcohol in my system. If I went below that level, I would go into involuntary detox. If I went above that level, then I'd be visibly inebriated. So I had to sort of sustain this level. And to all intents and purposes, if you'd have looked at me, you would have never known I had drink on board, because there's a lot of people out there like that.
But if you're drinking to that extent, and you're what, mid-30s by then, 40s? What?
Yeah, I was about 30s, 37, 38.
Right. So you're drinking to escape something. It's not just, "I'll have a drink because I like the taste of it." Kevin, what is it you're escaping?
It's not that. I wish that is a myth. It's not a myth, actually. It's one of millions of reasons why people drink, and mine certainly were escapism. Escapism from what? I mean,
so you're deliriously happy, everything's great, but you're drinking yourself to death.
No, I was drinking because I wanted oblivion, really. I just wasn't. I don't know. I wasn't hiding from anything. I didn't have any dark secret in my past. It certainly wasn't genetic, as far as I'm aware. I drank because I loved it. I absolutely adored drinking. I adored going to the pub. There was a certain amount of protection there in the pub. And I think addiction is down to something as simple as, have you got blue eyes or have you got brown eyes? You know, it's one of those things that you have become dependent on that drug of choice.
The Daily Mirror wrote copy last month.
Yeah.
And here's what they said. After years of hell-raising boozing and drug use, the actor best known as Curly Watts had hit rock bottom. His wife Claire had left him, and bosses had decided to write him out of the soap. Is that accurate?
They hadn't decided to write. Well, I suppose they had. At that particular moment, yes, my wife had left. She was also in recovery, and was in recovery maybe 2 months before I actually put my first foot on the road to recovery. They decided to write me out because they decided the best place for me was a hospital.
Because had you been coming into work really drunk, or what?
No, I mean the things about functioning alcoholics is they turn up for work usually before time, knowing exactly what they're doing, because they don't want any close investigation of what they're doing. So they make sure that they are really on the ball. I mean, it's like housewives have a lot of problems with drinking, and if you went into a functioning alcoholic housewife's house, everything would be spotless, because they don't want to invite any sort of probing. So, as I said, you would have never known that I had drink on board, because I knew exactly what I was doing. But however, after a certain amount of time, as it's down to the individual. The individual has got to turn around and say, you know, enough is enough.
The reason I read that Daily Mirror copy to you is because
Yeah.
it mentioned rock bottom. What was rock bottom for you? Was
Rock
there a
bottom?
pivotal point
Well, the
where it
first
all caught up with you?
the first chapter of the book is pretty hard going because it's my rock bottom and it's also my best moment all rolled into one. I'd gotten up early, as is my wont, and I started drinking. I had the script in front of me. I'd learnt the words, and then I discovered I didn't have my supply, and I didn't have any means of getting any at that time. And the first chapter is this horrendous 2-hour period where I was absolutely frightened to death of going into involuntary detox, and the battle of being able to get hold of a supply, knowing that my wife had left me, and knowing that I'd woken up again in that state where you know all the promises that you made, swearing on the Bible, all the promises that you would never do it again, and I'd done it again. And that's rock bottom. The positive side of that is when eventually, I won't go into all the details of the first chapter because it's quite lengthy, is I was driven to Granada, and I realised then a moment of sanity, a window of opportunity, that if I carried on, then I would die. And the thing is, the important point of that is it was what I was going to do. You know, I was going to die. What steps am I going to take to do it, rather than other people saying you must do this, you must do that, because it doesn't work.
Was the Priory
Yeah.
a scary place?
Well, the Priory, there's a lot of rubbish talked about the Priory. They say, I mean, it's you know, the beds are comfy, and they think it's an upmarket hotel, but at the end of the day, the Priory is a psychiatric unit, and they lock the doors at the end of the day, you know, and it is a scary place. Any place is scary where you have to stop what you're doing and look at yourself. No one likes to look at themselves. It was very scary for me because it obviously I used to say fall from grace, but that I think is a misnomer. I wasn't a fall from grace. I was very ill, and it's a shame-based disease, and I was very, very shameful.
And do you think you were psychologically ill?
Oh yeah, it's a psychological disease. I mean, once you put the drink down, and you've got your choice back, then you know there was a point where I didn't have that choice. I had to drink to function, but after a while, when your body has recovered, and the body being the wonderful thing that it is, it doesn't take that long. But then the psychological games start kicking in, because you are obsessed with alcohol, obsessed with it. And there your brain starts to say, you know, well, you know, you weren't that bad, starts to tell you things that aren't true. So it's very much a psychological disease, as is any addiction. And that is the hardest bit to break, is the obsession, the disease telling you, the denial, telling you that you weren't that bad, which is normal, because if you, say for example, you're playing football and you broke your leg playing football, now to all intents and purposes, you'd say, well, that's it, I am never ever playing football again because it hurts. But it doesn't work like that, because your body heals. And your mind tells you that you know it won't happen again. That's the way the body works.
So when the alcohol is set down, when that physical, I guess, oblivion of, you know, you're drinking and you're drunk, and when that's gone, but when you're psychologically not well, and by the way, I've made films just last year, Kevin, on depression and all that kind of stuff. And I actually respect those people that stand up very tall and say, yeah, I've had a mental health problem, and it's just like a heart attack. So there's absolutely no judgment from me. But were you able to identify in yourself what your psychological weaknesses were? You know,
well,
what was happening? You know,
were you
in a state of confusion? Were you overworked? Were you overstressed? What was it?
Well, no, well, that's very easy. That's a very easy thing to point at. It's like, it's an obvious answer. I was stressed, and people do drink because they're stressed, and people do drink because they're overworked. But I can't speak for them. I can only speak for me. And for me, I wouldn't say I was stressed or overworked. It was just I would come to a point where I couldn't live with it, and I couldn't live without it. I found great comfort in alcohol, and I had some great times drinking. But once I'd become dependent on it, it didn't work anymore. It just didn't work, and it wasn't giving me what it gave me before, which was this sense of well-being, of feeling everything was all right with the world. It was not like that at all. And if I could tell you why addiction happens, I'd be doing this interview from Barbados or somewhere.
Sure.
I've no idea, and I don't think people do. It just happens.
So you're behind those locked doors in the Priory,
Yeah.
and part of what the Priory gives you, presumably, is space and a little bit of time and a little bit of quietness.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
how did your body and mind react to that quietness and that space?
Well, I just didn't want to be there. I mean, I thought what I'll do is, and this is, I think, probably addiction talking. I thought what I'd do is I'll keep my head down for a few weeks, and then what I'll do then is, when everyone's forgotten about it, I'll slowly start drinking again, and people won't notice. But the thing about the Priory is, or any rehab, is they tell you, look, this isn't going to get any better. It will get better if you stop drinking and you do some work on yourself. But we can guarantee you that if you carry on drinking, then it's just not going to get any better. And then it becomes a question of faith. And then you think, well, do I believe these people, or do I go my own way?
How do they win over your trust? Because they are strangers. So how do they, to trust them with such a life-defining aspect and moment? Do they win over your trust, and how do they do it?
Well, for me, they've all been where I've been, and therein lies the revelation, where there's certain things that you won't talk about that you've done under the influence, and they tell their story, and all of a sudden you realise that they've done exactly what you've done, and that is an immense sense of relief. Because there's things that you've done that you don't want to tell anybody, and all of a sudden you find out that other people have done exactly the same thing. So that's how they win you over, and it's not by pointing the finger and saying you are an alcoholic. They win you over by saying, well, look, this is what happened to me, and then this is what happened, and this is how I got better, and this is how my life was then, and this is how my life is now. So there's a hope. I mean, there's times when I didn't want to drink. I didn't really want it, but I had to. And that's addiction.
Were you frightened of coming back outside again into the big world?
Absolutely scared to death. I mean, I was 28 days in 4 weeks in recovery. In rehab.
That's a long time.
It is. It's a long time to sit and look at yourself. And to look at the chaos that you've caused and the damage that you've caused. Do
you want to share it with us, what damage you caused?
Well, it's for every one alcoholic. There's 4 other people touched by it, and it's families and friends, and people covering up for you, and relationships that have which have been damaged. We didn't have any children then, Claire and I. That relationship was damaged. We were drinking buddies, and it's all the lies and the deceit, not just to other people but to yourself, because you deep down you know that your drinking is not normal, but the denial is incredibly strong, and it has a power over you that which is hard to break, because it's the master of everything. You don't go anywhere without a drink. You find yourself actually, your world gets smaller because you don't want to go out and you don't want people to know the shame of your drinking. So therefore you don't go to the pub anymore. So all those reasons that you drank in the first place become, well, they're not valid anymore.
Mm. And you haven't got Coronation Street.
No. Well, at that moment, you know, I became to realise that was the least of my problems.
Really?
Oh yes. I mean,
see, does work in a big gig like that not give you I guess a solid foundation, and you build everything else solid then around that solid foundation?
Yeah, it's no good when you're dead, because this is what you're dealing with. You're dealing with life and death, and there was people within my group that suddenly didn't, you know, they went away for a weekend leave and they didn't come back, and on their death certificate it didn't say, they didn't say death by alcoholism. It said death by falling downstairs, suicide. And this is what we're looking at. I mean, this is, you know, you can't mess about with this. It's like, oh, you know, he's got a problem with the drink. It's death. And if you're lucky, it's a quick death. And if you're not lucky, then it's a very slow death. And what it is, it takes everything from you. There's certain people in the media, as we speak, who we can see visibly being destroyed by their addiction, and it's taking everything from them. And the last thing it takes, of course, is their life. So when you think, well, when you're weighing that up against a career on the television and your life, it kind of puts things into perspective.
Did you ever contemplate suicide?
It certainly crossed my mind.
At what point?
I think during 1997, 8 and 1996, 97, 98, they were my really rough times, and the addiction had a hold of me in such a way that I was thinking, I just can't do this anymore. You know, it's exhausting, because you've got to think which lie fits where. You've got to keep a supply with you at all time, at least never more than 20 feet away, and obviously the shame-based thing. It's a shame-based disease, and you're so shameful, you've got very low self-esteem, and you think, well, you know, I can't keep this up, maybe it'd be better off if I wasn't here. It certainly crossed my mind, and but I'm not that brave, you know. So I decided, no, I don't think that's an option. But the thing is, that's the whole point of recovery, is you start looking for options, and the hardest option, of course, is to admit to yourself and to other people that you've got a problem, and to do something about it. That's the hardest one.
I started off at the beginning of this interview, Kevin, talking about how very few of our lives are a straight line, you know, whether people admit it or not. And you know, obviously you're speaking out publicly about yours, and it's in the book. You know, you're a bump in the road. Lots of us have bumps. One of an old friend of yours, Michael Lavelle, has had a huge bump. Did you speak to him during the court case? Are you standing by him? Is he in trouble?
I didn't speak to him. I just sent him messages of support. I mean, I've known Michael for a very long time, and I knew that it was complete, utter rubbish. And I'll say to you what I've said to everybody, that I don't think it should have got to that stage in the first place, and there's no real winners in this particular case. And I wish Michael all the very, very, very best for the future.
He started drinking again, despite admitting he has a drinking problem.
Well, at the end of the day, Michael's recovery is Michael's recovery. If he decides to do something about it, then that's entirely up to him. Otherwise, it's not going to work. When I was at the height of my addiction, if someone had came to me and said, you've got to stop drinking, my answer would not have been very polite.
He's had people attack his property. He's had people attack his home. He's been plastered over national newspapers. That's pressure.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't really want to talk about Michael that much, because I don't think it's fair. To be absolutely straight with you, I don't think it's fair that I talk about Michael.
That's fair enough. And let's move on. Why are you telling your story now?
Well, when I first got sober, which was 15 years ago, there was some pressure there or some ideas that I should write a book, and I didn't want to, because I didn't know enough. I didn't know enough about me. Certainly didn't know enough about the disease, I mean, financially, I suppose it would have made complete sense, but I would have felt a bit of a fraud. I mean, people do this, you know, they're sober 5 minutes and write a book, and if they want to do that, that's fair enough. But for me, I needed to put some distance between me and my last drink before I could really tell the tale properly, and I wanted to make sure the tale had some sort of hope, a message of hope in it. And I think for the hope, you've got to put some time in. You know?
What is that message of hope, finally, Kevin? Are you on your feet again? Are you strong as a human being again? Do you feel whole?
Yeah, I'm enjoying my life. You know, I'm having a good time. When I got sober, I suddenly realised that I could do anything. You know, as long as I didn't drink, I had freedom. I could do what I wanted, and my sort of driven self came back. I mean, I said, right, I'm going to be a pop star. I got signed by Simon Cowell. I'm not saying, to your dear listeners, that if you suddenly decide to get sober, you're going to be a pop star, or you might, who knows. But I decided that, you know, that's what I wanted to do, and so the story in the book is not only this of recovery, but it's the story that I could do anything I wanted to do. But more importantly, and this is really the point, I can sit still in my own skin. I don't crave the next party. You know, the grass is not always greener. I mean, I'm still human, of course, and I still have my problems. I'm still, you know, want things and go about things the wrong way. But the thing is, the most important thing is, I know I have a daily reprieve, and if I don't drink, I'm in with a chance. And for anyone who's listening to this who thinks they've got a problem, the message is, you're not on your own. You're not on your own. There are millions of people like me in recovery. I mean, I think these days we spend so much time focusing on the problem. You turn on the television and you see, you know, drunken Brits abroad, or you turn on a news programme and you see, ladies and gentlemen, tonight we have cameras outside boozers in Manchester, Birmingham, Belfast, Dublin, or whatever, at kicking out time to see what problems we have. Why don't we focus on the solution?
First for breaking news and the best live sport.
This is BBC Radio 5 Live.
Hamlet in Sheffield at the Crucible, just across the Pennines there. So for me, it was just a perfect fill-in while I was waiting to go and do this other show. I mean, it wasn't until I walked into the place that I realised this amazing television institution that I was just about to join.
It's an incredible institution, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
What's it feel like behind the scenes of it? Is it like most big institutions in terms of, if you're at the top, there's a lot of pressure?
No, I mean, there's pressure, but there's pressure in all jobs. I mean, there was pressure then because we had to consistently perform to a certain level. And it wasn't just the actors, it was the writers. And that time, 1976, 77, punk was just breaking out. And I think that opened up a lot of doors for a lot of people, because my peers, certainly in the likes of Johnny Marr, Andy Rourke and so forth, were doing things which were groundbreaking, and a lot of my peers were writing stuff and were performing stuff. And I think that kind of music arts revolution opened doors for a lot of people. I think we need a new one. I think we need a new revolution musically. But
what would that be?
Sorry?
What would that be?
I don't know, something different. I mean, we're so wrapped up in X Factor and things like that we're missing the point, aren't we? We're missing the roots, and now it's just all that kind of stuff. So I was a normal guy until I discovered performing arts, and then that sort of changed me somewhat.
Changed in what way?
Well, it made me certainly more outgoing, and I realised it was a top way to meet girls. Which is, I think, a lot of lads get into drama purely for that reason, and plus it's easier than maths or English, and it's two periods of of messing about, really. So that's what really got me into it. And then I discovered it as an art when I ventured further into things like Manchester Youth Theatre, which was a very professionally run outfit. And then I realised that, well, that was the only thing for me. Plus, at
Now time for our 11:30 interview this week. It's with the man who played one of the best loved characters in Britain's longest running soap opera. Kevin Kennedy played Curly Watts in Coronation Street for 20 years. But in his new book, The Street to Recovery, Kevin talks about his battle with drug and alcohol abuse while he was on Coronation Street. You can pick up the phone to us about this interview if you like, 0500 909 693. He'll tell us about the addictions that nearly killed him, but I started by asking him about his early life.
I was just a normal child. When at school I didn't excel in anything, and I wasn't rubbish at anything. I was kind of a middling sort of person. Played all the normal sports, played football for my school, swam for my school. It's just people want to be famous, and they've got to have a backstory, which I find nauseating, but there you are.
How did you get the break into Coronation Street?
I was quite a busy boy before Coronation Street. I'd been in the West End, and I was performing in various theatres around the country. And when the Coronation Street gig came up, that's exactly what it was. It was a gig. I thought, brilliant. It means I can live at home. I can't have to pay for me digs. I get my washing done and some food, and I live with my mum and dad. And it fitted perfectly, these 4 episodes, they fitted perfectly into a 2-week period where I was out of work. And I was away to do